getting, I mean, then however you want to share it.
Yep.
The city page would be great. I put it on my council page and my personal page.
And we're on YouTube. All right.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah.
So we'll officially start again. We had some technical difficulties, but welcome to our City Council meeting at 6 o'clock on May the 4th, be with you 2021. And we have 3 topics for today. The first is supportive housing services, local implementation plan. And Josh and Ty are with us. And Ty, you're going to start us off. Is that right?
Great. Yeah, thank you, councilmen and women, for inviting us today. My name is Ty Schwefferman. For the record, I'm a program coordinator with community engagement. And I think Josh also introduced himself and will be presenting with me today. This presentation is for the Supportive Housing Services program, which is in the Department of Housing Services. So today we're going to review the Supportive Housing Services measure and program. We're going to review the Washington County implementation readiness and provide some times at the end for questions and feedback, of course. So to start off, just a little bit of history and background. This Supportive Housing Services measure passed in May of 2019. Or excuse me, May 19th, 2020, 58% of voter support. It was built and championed by a broad regional coalition of businesses and community leaders. Scales to achieve functional zero chronic homelessness regionally. It's the largest per capita investment to address homelessness in the nation. The Supportive Housing Services revenue, this is just a quick breakdown of how this is funded. The program is funded with a 1% tax on taxable income of more than $125,000 for individuals and $200,000 for couples. 1% tax on profits of businesses with gross receipts of more than $5 million. Oops, excuse me. It's estimated that it will generate over $200 million per year. Washington County will receive 33% of that total revenue. In year 1 will be $38 million and is estimated annually at $75 million in year 3.
Reminder, just real quick, if you're on here, please mute the phone while Ty is talking until Q&A.
Cool. Well, I am hearing some audio, but I can just power through, so it's fine.
Whose phone ends in 2994? Please mute.
Brad, are you able to mute somebody?
Let me check. I'm looking here.
All right, so while that's happening, I'll just continue on the presentation. So this Supportive Housing Services measure set some prioritization of communities in need. People with disabilities, experiencing or at risk of prolonged homelessness, and with extremely low incomes are considered part of the population A. People experiencing episodic homelessness or at risk of homelessness are considered population B. And the measure designates to lead with race, meaning that Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities that are disproportionately impacted will be part of the focus of this work. Homelessness in the region. I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but we wanted to include a slide that gives you a bit of a ballpark of what homelessness looks like in our region in the 3 counties. Homelessness by race. Now, Black and Indigenous people make up only 5% of the total region, but comprise 20% of the regional homeless population. And so these are a graph showing those numbers. The supporting housing supportive housing services. So housing services includes long-term rent assistance and other emergency or short-term housing interventions. Support services includes housing, case management, mental health, addictions and recovery services, employment support, peer support, and many more, including other types of health services. Our overall goal is 5,000 supportive housing placements. 1,665 placements are our share within Washington County. And with that, I will turn over to Josh Kreitz for the remainder of the presentation. And just go ahead and give me a cue when you're ready to move to the next slide.
Sure.
Hey,
Thanks so
Hey,
much.
Ty, could I ask you a quick question before you move on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that last slide with the goal for Washington County on the 1,600 and change housing units. Over what time frame is that? Because obviously this funds into the future, right? So
Sure. Ty, are you okay if I answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead, Josh. Thanks.
Yeah. So we understand it's to take time to ramp this program up. Our hope is that within the first 3 to 4 years, we can reach that milestone. So I think we're going to get more into like specific year 1 goals, but that's a really great question, Counselor, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So we're hoping to hit that in the 3 to 4 year goal.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Just for the record, my name is Josh Kreitz. I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Department. Again, really happy to be here, Mayor and Council. So Ty did a great job kind of setting this up. And when we talk about the supportive housing services measure, like when we're talking about dealing with and housing chronically homeless individuals, really there's 2 sides to that coin, right? We know that we have to have the housing, the long-term rent assistance, but we absolutely have to have those wraparound services to go with it, right? So to ensure that folks can get housed and stay housed, and that they can be successful members of their community, their apartment complex, or wherever they're staying, they need those wraparound services to help them be successful. Next slide. So this is our supportive housing services implementation timeline. I'm not going to go through this whole chart for you, but I will kind of highlight that there has been a lot of work going into this throughout the last several months. So this was approved by voters, as Ty mentioned, last year in May. We've been working really hard with our local implementation plan committee. We've been going out, meeting with city councils. We've been talking with our board of county commissioners and getting policy direction from them. And where we're at right now is that the LIP draft has been finalized. The board has approved the LIP draft, and the Metro Oversight Committee has approved it. And now we're going to be going to the Metro Council themselves here May 18th in a work session. And we're hoping to have Metro approval. At the same time, we need to have an IGA in place with Metro. So we're negotiating the IGA terms with Metro right now. And we're really hoping that we'll get this thing, the implementation of this program started in July. Next slide, please. Within the department, we just understand this is a tremendous amount of work because we really need to be able to stand up this massive new system of care for Washington County, right? $40 million in new funding for homeless services. That's just a game-changing amount of money for our county. So the work groups that we're working on right now are regional long-term rent assistance. If you're familiar with the Section 8 program, it's kind of like that, except for a brand new Section 8 program regionally funded. And that's where those 5,000 units, the 1,655 locally here in Washington County that Ty referred to. We understand we need shelter capacity within Washington County and throughout Washington County, we need that to be geographically dispersed. We also understand we need to have a service provider network, again, with an emphasis on culturally specific services. So we need to contract with eventually probably dozens of different nonprofits, culturally specific organizations who can help us create this system of care and provide the necessary services. We also have a data management and coordinated entry system work group. And then again, we're going to be working with a lot of county and city staff coordination. Next slide, please. So as we look at our local implementation plan, what this document really does is it gives us a framework. It frames us up for our 10-year program implementation. I've had the opportunity to be really involved. It's been great in partnership with partners, stakeholders, our community. I can tell you, I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 different organizations represented from throughout Washington County, 75 different individuals. So it was really a really great process having so many individuals and organizations involved. This was approved by our board April 6th. It was scheduled for Metro's Oversight Committee April 26th. I was there, so I can tell you they did pass it in the session, which we were happy about. And again, the plan itself, just some highlights. It goes over the analysis of our current system of unmet needs. I'm sure that your council and your community has seen kind of the increase in homelessness, encampments throughout Washington County. So really looking at what's missing in our system. And of course, we want to have that analysis of racial disparities and strategies to advance equity. And then of course, commitments to serving our priority populations while also advancing racial equity, tri-county coordination, geographic distribution, and then of course, being able to meet our data outcome metrics. Next slide, please. Just to give you some ideas, your council, so you have a clear understanding of kind of what our first year of planning is. So again, we're looking at $38 million in the first year, and that will scale up, we believe, when fully scaled to $75 million. So again, truly just a whole different ballgame when it comes to funding. So we're going to be focusing in on shelter and transitional housing, outreach and navigation services. So if you've seen some of the homeless encampments, if you've seen the street homelessness that we're starting to see folks intense, we need to get folks out there who know how to work with these individuals and families and outreach them and get them into the system. That way we can get them into shelter and long-term housing. We're going to be able to provide that long and short-term rental assistance, supportive services, and then helping build out the capacity of a provider network. Again, Washington County, our job won't be to provide direct services. Our job will be to build up a system of nonprofits, CBOs, and culturally specific providers that can do this work. Next slide, please. We decided within our local implementation plan, and I'm always really excited to talk this slide right here specific. We decided to put some real hard goals out there because this is a lot of money. We have a huge need. And I think it's time to put some bold goals out there. So in year one, our goal is to provide 500 supportive housing placements. That means house 500 chronically homeless individuals, 500 additional households achieving housing stability. So these could be folks who maybe, due to the pandemic, they're at risk of being homeless. We want to be able to stop that from happening, or maybe somebody just needs help with their rent for a couple months. We want to be able to provide and stop homelessness for 500 additional families. Have 100 year-round shelter beds added to our current winter shelter capacity. Really focus on building out that culturally specific network, and also show that we have measurable goals that demonstrate equitable outcomes. Again, we want to show to your council, to all the councils throughout Washington County, to Metro, to our regional partners, and the voters who approved this measure, exactly what we're doing with the funding that's been provided. Next slide, please. So some of the next steps, just so your council is kind of up to date on what we're working on right now. So we're doing a procurement solicitation for service providers. That's a RFPQ. And that's going to allow us to qualify a number of different service providers to come in and build up and do this work with us. We're also doing a procurement process for shelter providers, RFP. We're also working through the LIP approval process. That's that local implementation plan with Metro, as well as executing an IGA. I also have a systems and culturally specific capacity building, technical and training assistance for service providers. And then again, the goal is to begin implementation July 1st, and then continue to build out an advisory body and evaluate, and of course, continuously improve this program. Next slide, please. So obviously we want to answer any questions that your council might have this evening. And we also, have a couple questions here up on the screen for discussion, which are, how would your city like to support or participate in the SHS programs? And then what housing and homeless programs does your city provide that you want to make sure that we know about? With that, I'm gonna kind of cease my presentation here and our presentation, and take any questions and comments that your council has this evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joshua. Tim, you have your hand up. You're muted.
Yes, I am now unmuted. I apologize. When this bill was first being sold to the measure was first being sold to the public, one of the concerns we had was we didn't want to see Metro turn into a housing authority, and we really wanted the counties who already had that, and Beaverton as well, to really lead the effort. How has your partnership with Metro been so far along those lines? Have they kind of held to their commitments that this is really that we need to leave this to the housing authorities that are the experts and already in place?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, so our partnership with Metro, again, they're the funder, and the 3 counties are the implementing jurisdiction. So we continue to work through our IGA negotiations, but thus far, I think the partnership with Metro has been good. You're absolutely correct. The county is scaling up to deliver this for the county, just like Multnomah and Clackamas counties are doing for their counties. And then we just have a really close partnership with our tri-county partners as we, develop this, right? So as we, for example, if we have this regional long-term rent assistance program, you're mentioning the housing authority. So the housing authorities are going to be administering this long-term rent assistance. Washington County will be administering ours. Home Forward will be doing Multnomah County and Clackamas County's housing authority. So, but we came up with the same program. That way we don't have 3 different voucher programs operating. So I think we've had some really good partnership and really helpful autonomy in setting this up for the needs of Washington County.
Well, that's super good to hear. Then my second question is more general in nature. And if you just look at Sherwood statistically, I mean, we're an affluent community for sure, but that doesn't mean we don't have issue. I think the last I checked with some of my partners on the school board, we had 17 kids in school that were couch surfing. We've had a couple of homeless encampments in town, and we definitely have a portion of our community that could use some help here and there. And I just but then we also have challenges too. We don't have easy access to transportation, and some of those other issues. I mean, I just like to get your thoughts on what are things we could be doing in our community that would work in a community like this to make sure that we're helping those individuals in our community that need it. And not everyone here is labeled as affluent, because I think that sometimes happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, Counselor, thank you so much for that question. It's a really helpful question. So one of the things that was really prioritized in this measure and within our local implementation plan was made really clear to us. This is a countywide problem. This isn't a Hillsborough problem. It's not just a Beaverton problem. It's not just it's a countywide problem. issue, and we're seeing homeless encampments, as you mentioned, throughout the entire county. So one of the things that could be really helpful, obviously, is if there's different organizations out there doing work in Sherwood, and they don't have to be housing organizations, they don't have to be homeless organizations. If they are, that's great. We need to encourage them to come in for the RFPQ. We need to encourage them. It's open still, and encourage them to come in and do this work and say, hey, we want to do this work, on behalf of the folks out here in Sherwood. And we can build up the capacity of organizations who maybe want to do homeless and housing work. We'll have the funds and the capacity building grants to do that type of work. Secondarily, though, it'll be our charge here at the county to ensure that we build up a large enough provider network that we can get outreach teams out to your city, and that we continue to have really good, close communications with your city manager and your city staff and your council about the needs of your citizens, to make sure that they're getting access to the funds, access to the services, and access to all the opportunities that this measure's bringing about.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Question from me. Amongst some of the hats I wear, I serve on the board of Work Systems Inc., along with Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Rogers, and others, and very proud of what they're doing with their limited resources to help folks get jobs, get support for housing and other things. A lot of the things that you'll be doing. Are you, as part of the process, are you going to coordinate different nonprofits or target nonprofits that can do everything that's needed for an individual or for a family? Because obviously it's not just about getting somebody housing. You need to get them mental or drug treatment assistance. You need to help them secure a job, get on their feet, counseling, whatever their full scope of needs, transportation, to hopefully advance them to the point where their level of assistance decreases over time and they become more and more stable. So what's your process like that?
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's a great question. I just saw Ty too, just by the way, drop the RFPQ link into the chat. So thank you for that, Ty. So I would say, what we see with our homeless population, it's really like a full range. We have some individuals who have really high acuity and chronicity. And by that, I mean, they have co-occurring like disorders, as you mentioned. They might have mental health issues, substance use disorders, that require them to have quite a bit of interactions and quite a bit of services, all the way up to, I was at a site that we're working on right now for a shelter, and folks were leaving and going to work, and it's just that they've fallen on bad times. It's hard to get an apartment because it's expensive, and they're going to work and working 40 hours a week, but they'd be homeless. And so I think what we're trying to do with this measure is really scale up the full range of services, right? Everything from that street outreach and navigation for folks who are street homeless or sleeping in places that aren't meant for human habitation, to those stabilization, mental health connections, substance use connections, to the other wraparound services for folks to say, okay, now I'm stabilized, that's great, but I want to go to the community college. I want to get a certificate program. I want to go to the university and get a degree, or I want to, get a better job opportunity. So we're trying to create a full spectrum, and we're calling a full system of care that can meet these different individuals at where they're at in their lives, and really give them opportunities and connections to all of those different service opportunities. So it's a major undertaking, I will tell you that much, to get the service providers under contract and get it ramped up. But I'm really excited about the team that we're building up to do this work. And I can tell you, I think, Ty, we had, when we did our RFPQ meetings with interested providers, I think we had anywhere from 50 to 100 different providers show up. Is that in the ballpark?
Yeah, our last two sessions, we had 50 representatives at one and 45 at the other. So there's a lot of interest and still room for more. Like Jocelyn mentioned, the RFP queue is still open. It will be open and proposals are due May 19th. So it's a little bit of a shorter timeline than we were hoping to get this information out to you all, but it's still an opportunity to apply and engage through this process.
So your goal of number of households that you want to serve is great, the 1,600 and change. Is that, am I correct in saying that that's how many you would want to be serving at any given, supporting at any given time? Then obviously the goal is to graduate families. They want to be on a different calendar of so that they're self-sustaining, hopefully, so that new families can then be brought in to be provided the assistance. And with that assumption, do you have an idea yet, or is it so brand new, how many families you hope to be able to impact, new families impact each year?
Yeah, thanks again for that question. So I think you're right. I mean, we're ramping up this brand new program and we'll get a lot of data as we go, right? So we could say our goal is year one, year two, year three, we want to serve 500 new families every year and ramp up to 1,600. But now you're talking about like turnover rate. And I think we'll learn more as we get more data. I've been working in housing for the last 12, 13 years at different housing authorities. So I could sit here and tell you, if you said, well, Josh, how many new families are you going to serve on the Housing Choice Voucher federal program? I could say our turnover rate's about 15%. And I've been at 3 housing authorities, and that's about right. But those are also, a mixture of senior disabled, working families. And when you're dealing with higher acuity, higher chronicity folks who are in permanent supportive housing, sometimes recovery and where folks are, that just looks different. And sometimes for some individuals and families, success is that they're not sleeping on the street anymore, that they're being able to engage in behavioral health and substance use disorder treatment, and that they can just maintain a housing unit. And for some families, that's success, and we'll be happy to sustain that. And for other folks, it'll be stabilization, maybe getting a degree, maybe getting a job and looking for other opportunities where they don't want to be on the program. So I think we'll learn a lot about that. But we're really trying to address that really hard to house population with this fund. So I'm just trying to be really realistic as we have this discussion.
Great. Other questions? I'll just chime in. There's no one's weighing in. At work systems, it's because that's my lens of what I've experienced. It's important that they work with a variety of service providers and the resources that they deploy for assistance. A significant part of their role is making sure that those resources are well used and all that good stuff. And then if some service providers aren't doing a good job, either to get the counseling and support to improve what they're doing for users of their service, or they stop getting funded and they find new service providers. Is that effort in with the Washington County, with what you do, is that in your bucket, Washington County Housing Authority, to manage service providers and understand how well they do over time, or is that something that Metro does?
No, that's a great question. So I've had the opportunity to work at several different housing authorities, really big ones like Seattle, where you have 30,000 families you're serving, little baby ones out in Walla Walla. And so this is a really interesting housing department. We're a housing department that encompasses several different business lines. So the housing authority is embedded here. I'm sure you've all met Annette Evans, who runs our homeless COC programs. We have the Metro Bond programs, and now we have this SHS. So the service provider contracts will actually be held within our housing department. So we're doing the RFPQ. We will be selecting contractors. We'll be training them, providing technical assistance, monitoring their contracts for performance, helping them, if some providers are having issues, and ensuring performance outcomes. So yeah, that will absolutely be within our department. And I think more to your points, yeah, we'll absolutely be looking at performance, but we also want to get our providers up to speed and give them all the assistance and technical help that they're going to need, especially in the first several months to a couple of years as we scale this up. Because you mentioned workforce development. Think about all these providers. I mean, you're talking about 50, 60, 70, 80 caseworkers, managers, supervisors, data folks. It's really scaling up a system of care. So there's gonna be a lot of jobs out there. So if you know folks, tell them who are looking for jobs, tell them to be ready.
Awesome. And you said the right things. So I'm glad it's that review function and stuff is within the county. That's great. Any other questions for Josh or Ty? Joe and his team will connect you guys with Sherwood nonprofits and things we'll be doing in our community to help families at risk, individuals at risk. We certainly have some great organizations. Make sure that they're aware of what you're doing about the RFPQ process, for sure.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you, Ty. Next on our agenda, Tyler Wright is the CEO of Columbia Willamette YMCA, and he's going to introduce someone to all of us.
Well, thank you, Mayor Marys. I will apologize to each and every one of you. I am the one providing all the noise in the background. I had an executive committee meeting at the Beaverton Oswego Grill, and it ran long. Actually, Mayor Mays said, "Hey, our meeting's over dinner and drinks," and I took him seriously. So here I am. So thank you so much for this time and effort. I'm going to do my introduction really quick and then mute myself again so you don't have to hear the really bad music that's playing over my head. My name again is Tyler Wright. I'm the president, CEO of the YMCA of Columbia Willamette. I'm celebrating now my 19 months of tenure in the seat. Most of my staff would say it feels like 19 years. Speaking of my staff, I am proud to introduce Scott Pierce. Scott is the new executive director of the Sherwood YMCA. I think some of you have gotten to know Scott. Scott came to us, grew up actually in the Buffalo, New York area, where he spent most of his youth as a YMCA participant in the Buffalo, Niagara area. Scott received his undergraduate degree from Gonzaga. And yes, we're still mourning with Scott that they weren't able to overcome Baylor. And received his MBA from the University of Portland. Scott came to our YMCA back in 2008 and was quickly elevated through his experience and his proficiency as the executive director of the Beaverton Hoop YMCA. When Ryan Buck left our employment at the end of November, I asked Scott if he would move over into an interim position in Sherwood to get us through the transition. At the end of January, Scott and I talked, and Scott adamantly said and passionately said, I want to stay here. I think I can affect the kind of changes that we want. Would you be okay if we strip the interim title off of my business card? And I said, absolutely. And I also realized working through Joe and a few others that, hey, we haven't had a chance to actually introduce Scott to each and every one of you. I'm proud to know Scott. In my short time with him, I find him an amazingly passionate, mission-driven individual who has an amazing business skill that he brings to our organization. So it's my pride and this moment in time to introduce Scott Pierce as our new executive director of the Sherwood Y. And Mayor Mays, I now will mute, which is a blessing to everybody on this call.
Thank you, Tyler. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Tyler's probably right. It does feel like 19 years already, but really, really blessed to have this opportunity and excited to work with each and every one of you and do whatever we can to make this Sherwood community a better place.
Well, congratulations on becoming the full permanent director at Sherwood YMCA and for escaping Buffalo.
That's fair. That is a fair fair statement.
Well, I just want to say, because I've been to Buffalo quite a bit, my favorite sandwich in the world comes from Buffalo, and that's a beef on weck.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think it's a Kimmelwick bun with the carrot seeds and salt. It's if you go to Buffalo, make sure you have one because it's absolutely amazing.
Terrific food there, from wings to that. Unique stuff.
Well, there's got to be some reason people stay.
It's,
Well, after you have the beef on weck, then you can go to Niagara Falls.
yeah,
Right.
no, it's a very family-oriented town. Families are involved in youth sports. I could name all my friends from high school. A lot of them still live there. They play in the same little leagues, the same hockey programs. Their kids play, families playing for years and years and years. So it's I joke with my friends. It's one of those communities that if you don't get out, you're going to stay there forever. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to stay there forever. It's really, really family oriented.
And they're also very proud of all their Super Bowl championships, right, Scott?
Very, very proud.
Oh man.
Very proud. We're getting,
We pull no punches in our YMCA.
I grew up a Minnesota Vikings fan, so I can commiserate. So no worries there.
And Joe Gall, proud New England Patriots fan, is smiling here in your suffering from.
He's finally beat the Patriots this year, so
yeah,
I'm assuming you're a Bills fan, Scott. I'm sorry.
No, you are right. I am a Bills fan, and I can say, the last division champ was not the New England Patriots. It was the Buffalo Bills. So, AFC East champions.
Here, here. And you like soccer or football, European football.
Whatever you will. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
By the Liverpool scarf I can see over your head. That's cool.
So that's Martin. Many of you know Martin. Martin and I are both bonded at the hip through Liverpool. So have some text streams that go on at quite some early times in the morning with the time differences for matches overseas.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Scott. Questions for Scott from members of council or city staff?
I'll just say that I appreciate the Board of Managers meetings have been moved from 6:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. Which I just got a notice for Thursday morning.
Yeah, I would like to move them at different times, but we'll see what works best for the group. It's 6:30 definitely wouldn't work for me either. I'll say that, Kim.
It was pretty early, but we made it work.
Yep.
Awesome. Any other questions? Well, welcome, Scott. We're again thrilled to have you leading the YMCA organization here in town, and as of late today, you're still going to be open tomorrow. So woohoo! And Friday.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to get downtown, visit some of the local businesses, get to know the community a little bit better. I feel like that's been a tough part of coming in this role. I wouldn't say it's been the easiest time stepping into it, but hopefully over the coming months, we'll get to be outside a little bit more, get to meet all of you guys in person. Obviously, like I said, be downtown a little bit more, meet more people, and act like a true representative out in the community like I would like to be. It's just a little bit hard to do right now.
Yeah, here. Awesome.
Mr. Mayor, did anybody have questions about the Y's interest in the purchase, or is that a topic for conversation at a later meeting?
That is not for here.
Okay, fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you, Ty. Thanks, Scott. We'll let you continue to watch, or you can sign off and enjoy your evening.
I'm gonna sign off this point because I'm getting leery looks from the people going, "Are you gonna hog that table any longer?" So thank you all very much. Can't wait to see you again, actually in person someday.
Yep, and I will take a lap around our facility and make sure our members are all happy. So thank you all for the invite tonight, and hope to see you in person soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Thanks,
everyone.
So the third item to talk about in our work session today is a couple topics with PD. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to share here. We'll click that, and we're good to go.
Perfect.
All right. Well, yeah, we're going to have an update on policing in Sherwood. I want to quickly introduce everybody that's with us on our end tonight. Of course, your two captains, Ty Hanlon, John Carlson. Both of them can chime in or answer any questions as need be, or help me answer any questions. They both have obviously significant experience in both of these topics, including I think both of them were canine handlers at one point in their career. We also have Corey Jench, who is our current canine handler, and nobody can explain the business of how canines work, and in particular how IRMA works, than Corey. So glad to have him with us. And then also, it's a real honor to have Chief Deputy Al Roque from Washington County Sheriff's Office with us tonight to help answer any questions specific to the mental health response and MHRT. So we'll get going. This is just a reminder slide. By the way, this presentation is an updated version of the one that was sent out to council a few weeks ago. So a lot of the information will look familiar, but there's a lot of new information as well. But you all have seen this before, but it's always a good reminder, especially for our community, to understand who we are and how we operate. And it's our goal to be the very best we can be, no matter what it is we're doing. So, mental health response. What are we doing in Sherwood? We are strong partners with Washington County, and it is a regional approach. And so these are the services that are available through our partners, Washington County, in Sherwood. So this is what we have access to in Sherwood. Those 5 tremendous programs: the crisis line, Hawthorne Walk-In Center, which if you have not seen that, hopefully post-COVID we can try to reintroduce that. The mobile behavioral health crisis team, peer crisis supports, and then of course the mental health response team, which I will be referring to as MHRT moving forward. That's going to be our primary topic. So the combined goal, of course, with Washington County and with Sherwood PD is we want to divert folks that are in any kind of mental health crisis from the criminal justice system whenever and wherever and however possible. The CJ system as we know it, the basics of arrest and jail, that's just not going to help folks. And so we want to divert them from that as much as we possibly can. So here's the kinds of calls on this slide that we might encounter that could involve a mental health component. And the primary mental health call is coded as a BHI, behavioral health incident. So that's when the call comes out and we know that it's clearly a mental health call, and that's what we're getting into, is a BHI. In addition, you have all those other examples. But the key to remember is that any call we go on, anything, you name it, it could be, as I say, a mental health call in disguise. And our officers may not figure that out until they get on scene, and they may realize that what they thought was a simple theft or whatever the case may be is actually becoming a mental health issue. So in the last 2 years for Sherwood PD, these are just specific BHI calls. So these are the ones that we know from the very beginning are going to be mental health calls. We had 33 last year, or in 2019, and 23 last year in 2020. That obviously, again, does not capture all the other calls that had a mental health component that came in as something else. Okay, the mental health response team, MHRT, is a shared crisis response, partnering LifeWorks Northwest. These are master level clinicians. These are folks that are trained and experienced at a level where they could be working in a clinic with actual patients, and they are with deputies from the Washington County Sheriff's Office and now some city officers as the program is expanding. And they work together to provide safe response, support folks in crisis, and increase community safety. And really, they're trying to make connection, get folks connected with treatment, and get folks engaged with follow-up support, so that we can try to minimize repeat occurrences and try to get people out of the cycle, as it were, of getting involved in situations over and over. So what we have with MHRT right now is 2 teams daily. This is the county side of things. So there are other teams that are being added. I think Hillsborough either just has or is getting ready to, the same with Beaverton. But this is just with the Washington County teams. There's 2 teams every day, 7 days a week from 11:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. And they respond countywide. They provide countywide support. Now, it's bold there because I'm just so proud of the work that Officer Kesey has done and Sherwood PD has done working with Washington County. So Officer Kesey is actually a member of MHRT, and he serves as a backup. So if one of the deputies takes a vacation or calls in sick or whatever, Officer Kesey, when he's available, can fill in. And so he actually operates in that capacity with MHRT. So here's some statistics for you. In 2019, and this is all from MHRT, by the way. So these are, I borrowed these from presentations that they've given, including at the last Police Advisory Board meeting. So 2,000, just over 2,000 specific mental health calls, and provided services in almost 1,100 of those calls. They also responded to an additional just under 3,000 calls to assist patrol on mental health calls in 2019. And then in 2020, MHRT responded to almost 2,300 specific mental health calls and provided services in just over 1,500 of those calls. And in addition, responded to another almost 1,700 calls to assist patrol. You got to remember, no matter what statistic or data point we're talking about at 220, it's going to be skewed because of COVID. So that 1,688, down about 1,200 or so calls from 19, probably had to do with the lower number of calls that patrol patrol officers were handling in 2020 as a result of COVID.
Chief, just a quick question on that.
Yes.
And if I missed it, I apologize. How often has the team actually come to Sherwood? When you talked about those calls, the 33 calls and the 20 calls that we had in 2019 and 20.
Yeah, so perfect setup, Council President. Thank you for this slide. So
Teamwork.
I'll jump to your answer at the bottom of that page. So in 2019, we had MHRT in Sherwood twice, and then 3 times in 2020. And those were specific requests that we made. So then some additional statistics. Obviously, there's reoccurring subjects, right? There's folks that are caught in crisis, and they have repeated challenges, and so those folks accounted for just over 1,300 contacts in 2019. But here's where it gets really kind of interesting. The criminal element was present in only 114 of those calls in 2019, of those total calls. So you can really see by that statistic that when we get involved with mental health calls, they're really not a criminal matter. It does happen, but it's really not in the majority of them. And even better, force was used only 18 times in 2019 out of a total of just over 4,800 incidents involving mental health. So, 0.4%, way less than 1%. I mean, and so that really speaks to the success of using these expert teams, if you will, to deal with these kinds of calls. And then you have the same data points for 2020. Almost 1,600 contacts with recurring subjects, criminal element in 122, and force used 22 calls out of just under 4,000 for 0.7. So still under 1% on that. And then again, you have the numbers there for Sherwood.
So, hey, Chief.
Yes.
So if I'm reading that right, 25% of the calls are reoccurring subjects. And do you happen to know just of that 25%, how many individuals that represents?
I don't. Chief Deputy Roque, any idea?
Oh, thank you. No, not off the top of my head. It's about 2/3 is the number that is in my mind for that answer. About 2/3 of the people that we contact make up that recurring call volume. But I don't have that specific. I could follow that up and get it back to you through your chief, though.
It's just a really interesting stat. Thank you.
Yeah, they spend the majority of their time dealing with the repeat customers, if you will, and the follow-ups of those.
So I again want to point out the stats on the bottom of that page. That in no way represents the number of mental health incidents or issues that we deal with in Sherwood. Those are just the responses, and there's lots of reasons why those numbers aren't higher. I think it becomes pretty well known that MHRT, as we've known it for the last several years, has been overworked. There's a huge need for more folks, and if there were more folks on, it's kind of a build it and they will come, unfortunately. But the reality is, if there was more availability, I'm sure they'd be engaged far more than they are now. Okay, and on that note, looking ahead, the folks at Washington County Mental Health and Washington County Law Enforcement are working to expand MHRT. I mentioned Hillsborough and Beaverton already. In addition, Tigard, Tualatin, and Sherwood are having ongoing conversations about trying to get a dedicated team to this South County area. I don't think either of those communities would have the call load to necessarily engage a team all of their own. And remember, it would be easy to just say, well, hey, we're going to dedicate an officer to that, but there has to be a clinician, right, to complete the team. And so that's a much bigger lift. And so we're working to partner and share resources and make that happen. And in fact, I will tell you, we have money in our proposed budget for our share of that. So the next thing, which is really, really exciting, is we're working on the protocol through our dispatch center and Washington County Mental Health so that our call takers can transfer calls that are obvious mental health calls right to the crisis line, right? So they will be able to screen them and they will be able to forward them to the crisis line rather than sending an officer to respond to that. And I don't think you're going to have anybody tell you quicker than you are going to have officers that, we don't want to go to there's so many of these calls that we really don't need to be going to, right? The person needs mental health help. And as much as we try to train up and be ready, they really need to get connected to the crisis line and get connected to services. And so that's what we're trying to do with MHRT, of course. And so this is going to be a big part of that, as we can divert a lot of those calls. And then finally, they're working to expand shelter bed capacity. So when people are in crisis, they have a safe place they can go.
Chief, do you know, or Deputy Chief Roque, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name. What's the tentative schedule or goal to have that set up with dispatch to be able to transfer obvious mental health calls to crisis centers or crisis lines?
I'm going to put Deputy Chief on the spot for that one.
Well, it sounds like a great thing.
It is a great thing, and thanks for that, Chief, for the spotlight. It's hard to say. There's a process to create what's a protocol within our dispatch center so that it is defined, understood, consistent throughout the county, because what they don't want to do is implement a protocol that's for Washington County unincorporated and Hillsborough, for example, but not used in Sherwood, Tigard, Tualatin, Forest Grove, et cetera. And so we have a group a police user group, and then a technical advisory group that all vets all of these kinds of things together to form a protocol along with our WACA partners, so that it can be something that could be used throughout the county, and then all the dispatchers have to get trained on it. So it's hard to put an actual time frame on it, but it is actively being worked. One of the major obstacles or challenges, I'll say, for this kind of protocol is whenever there's any kind of potential threat of violence, that's when you need a cop to show up, at least at first, to bring the situation under control. And then you could bring in these support resources, these expertise to solve the bigger problem that's going on. But the hard part is getting through that initial call information, because it's usually not super accurate and certainly not complete. So it's challenging, I guess, is a long way to answer your question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al. Okay, any other questions on MHRT? That was a kind of a foot race through that, but if any of you haven't, and our public watching, if you haven't had a chance to watch the Police Advisory Board meeting from April, I would encourage you to do that. It was, they did a great presentation, and that's on YouTube, and you can watch that. So there's a lot more detail in that. Okay.
Chief, in that presentation you talk about with the other or our board, do they get into the training that your officers go through on dealing with mental health issues when they don't have the ability to have the county team with them?
Yeah. So, and I can speak to that a little bit. So there's a program called CIT, and it's crisis intervention training. And it was developed some years ago to teach police officers how to respond in these kinds of, and how to recognize and respond to folks in mental health crisis. And it was developed, and its original intention was to be delivered to police departments so that they could have a certain percentage trained, and they would have specialized people that could respond to these types of calls. Well, we very quickly realized that that wasn't adequate, and everybody wanted to get more people trained. And it's now kind of become, I wouldn't say the standard, but it's becoming more common to try to get more of your police department trained. We've got probably, if I remember when I looked at Police Advisory Board, I think we're approaching half of our department patrol folks have gone through the full CIT training. And here's the challenge, it's 40 hours. So we're putting somebody off the road, and we're investing for an entire work week for them to go to this training. We partner with Washington County Mental Health. We hosted several of them at Sherwood PD before COVID. And unfortunately, COVID, we keep saying with everything else, COVID really changed that, and we haven't been able to train and have those trainings. And so we're really looking to get those ramped up and get them going again, so we can get more folks trained. But it's a pretty heavy lift to get the CIT training delivered, but it's pretty good training.
And Chief, if I could just add that the MHRT that we're talking about, that team actually, one of their tasks is to deliver that training. So they're the actual instructors. They develop the protocol and the curriculum and performance objectives.
Well, I super appreciate all the effort that's gone into getting to half of our patrol officers trained. That's awesome. I know you'll continue to work on that. I'm assuming this is part of the curriculum with the police academy too, when you have new folks going through that down there.
Yeah, so the state of Oregon has, through DPSST, has implemented this as a part of their training, basic training curriculum. They're not getting 40 hours because, frankly, they can't fit 40 hours into an already full curriculum, but they are getting, I think, like a day and a half basic level. So compared to 40, it may sound like, well, gosh, that's not enough, but you got to realize that just a few years ago, there was nothing. And certainly when I came out of the police academy, for decades, we didn't have this training, and it wasn't an issue.
I'm guessing that the training's more impactful when you've had some time on the job too.
Just like all training. That's right. Yeah.
And Chief, after an officer gets the 40-hour training, is there refresher training, follow-up training, a year, 2 years? Is there some sort of cycle like other types of training?
I want to say yes, but I don't have specifics because and maybe Chief Deputy might know, because it's so new that I think all the effort's been put into, getting folks through that initial training. But there may have been some updates and refreshers. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't really speak to what you're doing with your staff in Sherwood. I could only speak to ours, but I don't think that would answer your question. So I don't know if one of your captains would have that answer.
Other questions for Chief Groth or Deputy Chief?
This is Sean. I just wanted to say thanks for the awareness and just really, I appreciate that you all are looking to move in this direction, recognizing that it is an issue that, I know police officers can do so much for our community and keeping us safe, but this just is such a specialized area, and recognizing that, asking for help in this area and in some cases, kind of stepping aside and letting these folks do the work that they're trained to do. I really appreciate the awareness that you're taking on and putting some funds towards this as well. I do appreciate that. Thanks.
Absolutely.
If I just want to add to that, I also appreciate the fact that there was focus on this here in Sherwood and Washington County before this became a national hot button issue. And I appreciate the fact that we've been leaders on some of this as we move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you, Council President. That's a great point. I'll tell you, I think Washington County law enforcement is just about as good as it gets across the country. I firmly believe that. So, okay, I'm not hearing or seeing any other questions. So we'll move on to the second topic. And again, as I did with that other slide, just a quick reminder, use of force, what we do is all governed by those various standards. And we're utilizing de-escalation and focusing on protection and control as much as is possible anytime we're considering the use of force. So we talk about canines, and the reason I mention that is because canines can be a use of force depending on the situation, and so it's important. That's an important reminder. So we have two canines in the department. We have a patrol canine, Irma, and a comfort canine, Mila. And I know everybody's familiar with both of them. Quick dog lesson, Dog 101. Irma is utilized for her instinctive and trained scenting ability. The key for Irma is her nose. Mila, comfort canine, is utilized for her instinctive and trained therapy ability. The key for her is her ability to sense and care for people. It's important to remember that both these instincts and the skills that we train into these dogs are science and research based. And clearly I didn't want to take all the time to go into that, but there is a ton of research that talks to this and talks to the innate abilities that dogs have. It's important to remember that both of them are still dogs. I mean, they run, they play, they're still dogs, and these instincts overlap. So just because Irma focuses on her scenting and her nose doesn't mean that she doesn't make people feel better, because that's an instinctive part. And the same with Mila. Mila can sniff things out and has a good nose as well, but that's not what she's specifically trained for, but she has that. No matter what we're talking about on a canine, it's critical that everybody knows that obedience is number one for both these canines. Before they do anything else and ongoing throughout their career, they have to be absolutely spot on with their obedience. And if at some point they mess up in that, it could potentially lead to a complete failure. Both of our dogs are community assets. They were purchased by the community. They're obviously highly valued and supported by the community. And in particular with Irma, just because of the time she's had on in this community, they are just amazing ambassadors for us. Folks just love them. Unfortunately, Mila hasn't had that chance. That would have been last year, but again, COVID and blah, blah, blah. Don't we just get sick of saying, oh, because of COVID, but anyway. So here's how we utilize, and here's how we take a look at patrol canines specifically. And this is kind of a generalization. As I said, Chief Deputy Roque could give you a perspective from a different agency. Corey, who is a tremendous canine handler, can add insight to any of this. But it's important to understand that a dog can search an area, a building, a field, you name it, much faster and much more efficiently than any police officer can. And they offer, just by the nature of who they are as a dog, they offer a different sense of, for lack of a better term, command. And you don't see dogs at every time you see an officer, you don't see a dog. And so they have that unique newness to them that when they show up, people tend to think, okay, and they pay attention. When from more of a use of force perspective, a dog can offer multiple levels of force that can gain compliance with people and eliminate the need where an officer may not be able to gain that compliance. And there would be a potential for a higher level of force. And of course, what we want to avoid at all costs is deadly force. And I have seen situations where the presence of a canine has in fact potentially saved somebody's life because that person complies. It doesn't make any sense, but the theory that I apply to this is that people will get into a confrontation with a police officer almost like they're not worried about the worst potential outcome, right? They could potentially be shot depending on the circumstances. Yet those same people want nothing to do with a dog. They don't, they just want nothing. And you'll hear them say, hey, no dog, no dog. Okay, I'm done. And it's just an interesting dynamic. And so that's that force prevention and force intervention. A canine taking a subject into custody that is not complying is a far better outcome than potentially that leading to a shooting. And as I said, canines actually de-escalate many confrontations, and it's a data point that we can't really measure, but I think they absolutely save lives in the right circumstance. So here's the types of calls that may require, there's no hard fast rule, but if there's going to be things that you say, hey, we need a dog for this, we can't do this. These are what they're going to be. Suspect tracking. Somebody's running, they're hiding, they need to be located, we got to find them. A dog can sniff them out. I can't. In the best shape of my life, I could never smell a bad guy, right? So a dog can. Article searches, any call where an item has been discarded, hidden, dropped, right? Dogs can do that. And those aren't always bad things. Sometimes, Corey tells a story of some kids coming to him one time and they had lost their keys in a grass field by the school and they were panicked. And he goes, well, here, I can help you. And Irma went out and found the keys for the kids. So confined, difficult space searches, crawl spaces, attics, thick brush, those kinds of things that officers can't get into. And then the types of calls that are just better served by a patrol, by a dog. Barricaded subjects, they could be in a vehicle, they'd be in a bedroom or behind some type of structure, or a large space search that would take a long time for a couple of officers to go through. A dog could go through in just a matter of minutes. So the canine actually increases officer safety by being able to smell and identifying danger long before anybody could see it. That could happen in any number of those circumstances. And they present obviously a much smaller and quicker target that can act faster than the suspect. And so those are advantages that they have over officers. So this is just a history slide. There's no secret that we had a bad experience with our first, I say first patrol canine in my tenure. We had canines long before I was here at Sherwood PD. But in 2012, we ended up with a dog that was overly aggressive and they failed. and we sent him back. And as a result of that failure, we reviewed the canine program from top to bottom, side to side. We worked with CIS to make sure we were doing everything right, and that everything we were doing met with their approval. And there's a list of some of the things that we learned and we implemented moving forward from 2012, which has really helped us establish a very, very successful canine program that we have now. And I'll just add, I'm not going to read through those, you can see them, but I'll just add that a key component of this, and I can't stress this enough, is the handler. Corey just does an amazing job, and he's extremely well trained. He's highly respected within the county as a canine handler, and that's critical. So, okay, so a little bit more about specifically Irma. She's an 11-year-old Belgian Malinois. We got her in August of 2012. She finished her certification and went in service in December 2012. And again, obedience number one, she trains every other week because we are committed to making sure that she is at her top. Certified by Oregon Police Canine Association. She can smell people, articles, and narcotics. And we'll talk more about ballot measure 110, but so she is trained like most, as far as I know, all of the dogs in Washington County. She's a guard and bark dog. So she finds people and she guards them and barks and makes an alert. And when she finds something else she's looking for, she does the same thing, by the way. She'll treat a little baggie of dope on the ground the same that she would a bad guy that she found. She guards and barks. She's only going to respond aggressively when she needs to defend herself or defend her handler. If a suspect is resisting and aggressive, she's trained to bite and hold. And when her handler tells her to release, she releases. Irma has, according to the stats that we've got in our canine program, she's completed 152 suspect tracks with 114 total fines and or captures. So Corey can explain that a little bit better because there's some overlap. There's some, folks that have showed up in multiple calls and that. But the key to this is that she has 0 bites in her entire career. So of all the work that she's done, she's never bitten anybody. So she is part of the way we view everything. I think everybody knows how we operate is that we try to be collaborative and share resources and be a part of the grander Washington County team. So she's a part of the interagency cooperative canine program. There's about 20 dogs in Washington County, including those agencies. And according to the Washington County lead sergeant, who kind of oversees the training we do with them, said mutual aid is critical because there's just not enough canine teams in the county. So,
Hey, Chief, a quick question.
Please.
I thought I read somewhere before that it was more optimal to the obedience training every week, or if we found that the biweekly works fine.
No, so the every week training, thank you for that question. I'll clarify. That included the narcotics. So when Irma was actively training and maintaining certification for narcotics, she was training every week. 1 week would be narcotics training. The other week would be patrol training. Now that we've stopped the narcotics training, she just does the patrol training, which is every other week. So thank you. That's a good clarification on that.
Hey, Chief, can I add just one comment to that?
Please, Corey, yes.
So I just want to touch on her obedience training. That is actually every day. Anything we do, her and I together, it's obedience. Even if we're playing, even if we're just out at home in our own backyard, every day is obedience training with her.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that. So there's a quick picture. This is a quick video. I just want to show you her obedience. So what that was he sent the dog to make a capture. The person put their arms up. He gave the command essentially that said, we're done, turn around, come back. And you saw her stop on a dime, turn around and come back. So those are her narcotic stats here on this slide. Again, because of ballot measure 110 and some case law, it's really muddied the waters for probable cause searches for narcotics and different things. And we're really trying to figure that out. So Washington County and Tigard have made the same decision. Washington County, on a patrol perspective, now they have drug dogs that are assigned to their WIN team, the narcotics team, that do nothing but work with the dope team. But as far as their patrol dogs, they don't have any of those that are doing narcotic sniffs. And Tigard PD made the same decision. They're no longer training and certifying their dog for narcotics. So I don't know what the future is going to hold with that, but that's where we're at right now with that. And then the patrol stats, those are the top 10 types of patrol calls that Irma has been involved in her career. Okay, so a couple of years of stats, and I, of course, I've only got the little piece of the screen because of my presentation, and I'm trying to rush because I know we're running behind. So holler if you got a question. But 2019, so as part of that team, Irma helps other agencies, and so she was outside of Sherwood 39 times with following types of calls, and in Sherwood 11 activities or incidents for the following types of calls. And so in 2019, she was still doing dope sniffs, and those tailed off and stopped in 2020. And so there you have the 2020 numbers, 17 and 8 respectively. Again, any data, as I said before, from 2020 is going to be skewed because of COVID and the fewer calls and activities. And then this is Irma's career. So you can see every year that she's been in service. Of course, 2012, she had like a month, something like that. But then the rest of those years are all full years. And of course, I apologize, I put captures on there, but I wasn't able to break it down by year. That's just a weak link in the program we have. So what that shows is Sherwood involvement and outside Sherwood involvement. And it's, you can look at this a number of different ways, obviously. And one of the things to keep in mind is that the value for the dog is to stay busy and be engaged. And so even though she's not in Sherwood, there is some value to her getting those trainings and those calls because that keeps her more engaged. So
Chief, what year was the marijuana legalized? Remember?
Oh,
I'm trying to understand because there's the in Sherwood is trending down significantly, and we had a huge drop in 2017. I'm assuming that's when the marijuana was legalized. I'm just trying to understand why we're seeing the drop in utilization.
I believe it was 2017 because it was the year I became a counselor.
I thought it was 2014, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, it was before that.
I can't remember.
Oh, you're correct, Sean. That was the second time it was on the ballot, was 2016 for Sherwood. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm talking about when it became legal statewide, right? So
2014 is when the ballot measure was passed. It went into effect in 2015.
So there you go.
Yeah, it's
as far as the drop, we just don't have a great explanation. I'd love to have Corey's input on that, but Corey, any thoughts on that?
On the drop as far as the narcotics go?
Overall.
Yeah, and overall total activities. I mean, you can see how her numbers kind of trended down, 17, 18, and 19.
I mean, this isn't just us. This is countywide, and I wish we could ask the suspects why. We're not getting as much work, but a lot of these cases, especially now, suspects are figuring out that we're not pursuing them in vehicles quite a bit. So people, instead of fleeing on foot, if they've figured it out, they'll jump in a car and flee in a car or flee on a bike. So it makes it harder for the dog to track them.
It'd be interesting to understand the kind of the demographics of the different cases or different call types across those years to see what's driving the decline. Is our sheriff still on from Washington County? Do they have any thoughts on this, or they've already?
No, I'm still here. I kind of agree with Corey's statement about the criminals. The gossip network behind bars is very effective, and people get the word out over which agencies are pursuing and not in vehicles, and so that becomes an easier path to escape us nowadays than it ever has been because of the risk of continuing the pursuits. In terms of call types, I don't know that there's been some case law changes along the way through the years about how and when canines can be used, but nothing so dramatic that would impact any kind of noticeable difference, I wouldn't think. Countywide, we've been fairly steady the last 3 years in deployments, and we've had a very low bite percentage out of those deployments. It's less than 0.5%, but there have been a few. I think there's a general kind of anecdotal perception that all of us have that people are far less inclined to comply when confronted. I mean, people challenge more, it seems like, than ever before for those of us that have been around for a while. I don't have hard data to support that, though.
One other thing that I can just kind of add for information is that just kind of reminder that, these stats that you're seeing, this is only the time that Irma is actually at work with me. So this is, on only a 40-hour work week. This isn't 7 days a week, 24/7 coverage. So keep that in mind when you're looking at all of these stats.
Okay, so here's some capture data that, again, we weren't able to break it out by year, just a weakness in the program. But so those are the captures. Some of those are repeat customers. Again, you encounter people, maybe on a particular month in Sherwood, and then 7 months later you encounter them in a different jurisdiction. But you can see that she was very well utilized for narcotics. And so that means that she did a sniff, and as a result of her sniff, somebody was arrested. And so those include locates, captures, and fines. So when you're looking at a hit and run, you're probably looking at somebody that took off, right? Because that would be burglary. Could be somebody was hiding somewhere in the building and she found her, or they took off. Same with theft. Could be somebody taking off, finding somebody that's wanted and hiding from the police. So you just go on down the line, and there's going to be anecdotal information to explain how she was used in those. But that's a list of the captures that she's recorded. Okay, we'll move on to Mila. She's a 3.5-year-old Labrador Retriever. Again, obedience. I talked about that. She's certified by the American Kennel Club with what they call their Canine Good Citizen. That's really the key for her. She's therapy trained to assist with trauma and PTSD. And she's constantly in training. Again, I'm so glad, Corey, that you made that point that I missed, that the training for these dogs, both of them, is just an ongoing day-to-day thing. But the key for Irma is through her genetics, the dog genetics I talk about, and the training. It's just amazing. She senses and responds to human emotional distress and provides opportunity for humans to release positive hormones, including serotonin, dopamine, and those are hormones that generate happy responses. So again, the research is just crystal clear. They've used the medical research in hospitals and other clinical settings where you introduce a dog and people just flat feel better. There's even a commercial right now that shows that. But anyway, that's what Mila does, right? So we introduce her with crime victims. We introduce her by just having her around with officers, maybe having a bad day. She comes in wagging her tail. That's her job. That's her number one. Focus on that. So here's what having these dogs and these resources cost us. Irma, the initial cost was about $15,000. That was paid by the legacy of the Sherwood Police Foundation. Mila was about $18,000. Most of that was training by the foundation. Through those ongoing years, through 17, it was just Irma, and then through 21, it was both of them. You can see how much that we've spent in the budgets for vet care, food and maintenance in our line, canine care line. Then you have handler costs, and we have figured that at its highest amount, just so you can see what those, as Councilor Rosner told me, opportunity costs were. So that's the fully loaded position with all the premiums applied. The premium pay alone, so just to have the dog, right? Because without a dog, Officer Jentz is a patrol officer just like he was before he got Irma. So those are the premium pay alone costs there. And the training costs, so using that fully loaded figure, it's about $748 for that 1 week of training every other week. The training is free, right? It's collaborative training with Washington County, and there's no cost to go to the training. So it's just those costs there. So, and that is it. Mayor, thank you. I tried to go as quickly as I can. I hope I didn't go too fast. Any other questions, anybody?
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate that. We certainly are appreciative of our dogs and what they do for our community and the region. With the change in ballot measure 110, it's going to be interesting over the next, well, as this year continues and next, see how that impacts the workload on the 20 dogs in the county.
Yeah, my hope is that we get to a comfortable place, because as patrol officers, we're also trying to figure out, as leaders for our patrol, we're trying to figure out what can they do, right? We do a lot of proactive work. Everybody knows that. Proactive policing is what keeps us at number 2 safest city in the state of Oregon. And that's what takes a lot of drugs off the streets here in Sherwood. And so we're trying to figure those challenges out with some of these court cases in ballot measure 110. And I hope, as I said, we'll find a comfortable spot where we can continue to do that and take care of our community.
Any other questions for Chief before we end?
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate all that information.
Thank you all.
And thank you all for having me as well. It's been nice talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you joining us tonight. All right, we will adjourn our work session, and in a couple minutes, we'll start our city council meeting. Thank you, everyone.